Hi guys. So what we're going to be doing today is object-oriented programming based on Java classes, and it's really very simple. I've just made two classes, and we're going to be connecting the two classes together and basically running it and seeing how they connect and how you could code anything in Java, and basically using JGrass as your platform to start and begin your programming concepts and languages. So to start off, I have to explain a few terms which I feel is necessary for this tutorial. Thanks again for watching the tutorial. Hope you subscribe, check out my new videos. If you don't have JGrass already, check out my previous video, which will show you how to install the JDK and JGrass. Explaining why we need the JDK. The JDK is the environment in which we could run JGrasp. Now JGrasp is the platform by which we can now enter code, and the machine can now compile and understand what we are saying by running it, and the machine is now interpreting what we are saying to it. So the machine will now take it and convert that into binary and send instructions to the CPU for us to receive an output. Basically, what you need to know about object-oriented programming is right here in this tutorial. So if you're getting started in coding and programming and everything, I suggest you watch this video a few times, get yourself familiarized with the object-oriented programming, the concepts, and how the keys. This is a very simple tutorial, and I hope everyone is going to be learning something new. So we got keywords in coding, and especially in object-oriented. Now you could have different classes and different ways to code based on different languages too. It's like another object-oriented language is C#. Another object-oriented language from that there is Java, and also you have others, which is C#.net and a whole bunch of other classes and stuff that you could, and languages that you could use object-oriented programming in it. Basically everything in the modern day age is based on object-oriented programming. In fact, Android applications are based on object-oriented programming. So we're going to start off with a very simple keyword. It's called class. Now what is a class? Now a class, I like to think of a class as a house that confines some amount of space. Am I right? If you have a house, it has some amount of space that's confined in it, and it could be like 4 meter by 4 meter, 5 meter by 5 meter. That's the amount of space in our land that we are measuring. Now if we think of a class, we are allocating space in the computer to store something. So what are we storing in there? It's like a whole bunch of, what do you store in a house? A whole bunch of things. You could have furniture, you could have human beings living in the house, you could have a bathroom, you could have a lounge, you could have a TV. There's a countless of things you can store in class. Then variables. Now I like to think of variables as the things you store in the house. So if you think of variables as the furniture and the people that take up the space within the room or the house, those are variables. Those small minor things that are entities on their own. So those things are like your TV, your furniture, your sofa. Think of those as variables. And then you got methods. So methods are basically like rooms. So you got a class, which is a house, and within a class you get rooms. So you get methods within a class, and within a method you get variables, and within a house you get variables too, because you classify, I have a TV in my house, I have a TV in my room. Does it make sense? Yeah. So moving forward, without classes there can be no methods, and this is true because you cannot write a method without a class, but you can have a class with variables and no methods. These are simple rules in which we use to code. They are basic rules. And what would you need to start off coding? So I've made a simple diagram here to show you what a class would look like as a house, and within it there's like about 6 rooms, and we call each of these rooms a single method. And within a room you could get variables, which is the furniture, the sofa, and so on. And so I drew a space in memory which actually is created in memory for the class, and within that class there's space created for a method, and within a method there's space created for variables. So this is how things are broken down in actual fact in a computer. So when we go down to what will you need to start coding, so I've explained the principles of object-oriented programming. So what we're going to do now is do 2 simple classes and show you how we can get started. What you will need is, I suggest you start coding with Java. It's the easiest framework. That is why I'm doing this tutorial based on Java and object-oriented programming. It is the easiest framework, literally the easiest framework you could start with. If you have to start with anything else, it's a lot more complicated than that. To start with anything else, Java and JGraphs is about the simplest thing you could get to starting coding. Yep. So let's go forward. And if you see my last tutorial, that we installed JGraphs in, and I want to take you back. We installed JGraphs, so now I'm in JGraphs and I opened up JGraphs. If you want to open up JGraphs and you have it installed, you don't know how, you just go JGraphs, hit enter, and you got JGraphs opened. Now I've already written 2 simple classes for the sake of this tutorial, but we'll go through this again, and I'll remove this. So I'm here and I don't know what to do now. So I go on File, New, because I can't create anything if I don't create a file, because where's this going to store the code? So how am I going to compile the code? How is it going to run if it's not stored anywhere? So I have to create a file first. So I go to File, New, and then I go to Java, because this is a Java program that we're writing. Then once we're in Java, we select Java. This window will pop up. Your cursor will start blinking on the screen. So you got this here, and we've got, so I want to write my class. So you know that if I need to start coding, I need to allocate, before you start coding you need to allocate a class. So you're gonna have to, this is the syntax to create a class. So you say public. Why public? Public is like saying I could have private, public, and protected. There's a reason for this. These 3 are uniquely different, and there's a reason for each of these to create a class. But what we're going to be using for this beginning tutorial, we're going to use public. So we're using public. Now that is basically going to tell the class, okay, if it's public, it's going to say, you know what, I'm allowing myself this class or this space in memory to now be accessed by other classes or other spaces in memory. If I say it's private, that means I'm not allowing this class to be accessed by other spaces in memory or classes that are existing currently in the other allocation memories around us. So protected is a lot more complicated. I want to explain that now, because for the sake of this purpose we don't need that information right now. So we can continue. And how do I declare a class? So I have to say I'm declaring a class. So I say public because I want it to be accessible by other objects, by other classes, and class because I'm allocating a space in memory, so I'm defining what I want. So if you wanted to say, you know what, I want an MP3 file, you go and download an MP3 file, and you're defining what you want. Now I'm defining what I want. I want my class. I want to build my house, my space in memory. So I'm saying class. That's my syntax. Syntax is a very good word to use. It is how you type in what language, like just as if you would create a sentence. This is basically the same way. If you wanted to say, you know what, I want to kick the ball, then this is, you would pass a message to that. Now you basically telling the computer, you know what, I want to create a space in memory. So this is how you do it. You'd say public class, then you name your class. What do you want to name that space in memory? Then you do name it. For the sake of this purpose, I'm going to name it test. Okay. And what's the syntax forward? So I open a curly bracket, I close a curly bracket, and that confines my code within that allocation of memory. So I could have all this code over here that's piling up, but it's confined to those two brackets. This is how I allocated my class. So moving forward, what will I do next? Within this class, I want to create a method. Now, there's two types of methods, but we're not going to go into the first type of method because there's two types of method, but you'll only need to know one for now. So whenever you create a class, note that you have to create this method, which is the name of the class. You take it down into public and test, because this type of method is called a constructor. This type of method allows other classes to call your class. It basically gives that functionality. So remember the syntax. Whenever you create a class, create a method. This method is public and the name. Okay? Now notice I didn't declare what it is over here because it is an instance of itself. Moving forward, we create another method, public. For the sake of this tutorial, we have a type of void method. You have different types of methods. So the void method basically says I'm going to do something and I'm just going to call myself, like, okay, if I'm calling this method and I'm saying, and there's a list of instructions within this method, it'll run this method and not give me anything back. Like there's no interaction for me to do next. So moving forward, it means basically I would just run that instruction and it would run on its own, and I wouldn't have to fiddle back into the code and do something or write more code to receive what I want from it. So basically it'll just conduct its instructions based on what's within that code. And I'm creating a method called message because for the sake of this tutorial, and open close is how we create the syntax, and within it I want to display a message. So to display a message, a simple syntax, I'm telling the computer display a message for me. This is how you do it. Say system dot out dot print open close normal brackets semicolon. Within the normal brackets is where you put your message. So simple as this is the syntax, and whatever message you want to put, you put it in there. So I want to say my first Java app. Now why I'm saying app, I know some of you are familiar with applications with all this nice buttons and stuff. Well, this is basically an application, but it doesn't have any graphical user interface. Graphical user interface is all those buttons and colors that you see just to give you functionality and make it look more appealing, but this is basically just doing a functionality I wanted to do. Yeah, so this is basically our compile class. So I compile this. Whenever you create a class, you have to compile it. If you do something wrong and you compile it, like if there's a syntax error and I compile, you will notice in the bottom it will give me an error, and it normally starts at the beginning of the word. That would say there's something wrong here. The syntax is wrong. So I'd go back to the code and it will highlight the line, and I'd look at the line and recompile, change my code, recompile. I'd get back on track. Then we're going to create, to run this class, I want to call it in another class, because that's what object-oriented programming is. Because this is now an object within space, and I want to call this object in another object. So that's what object-oriented programming is. You're calling objects within objects, and they're all interrelated, but basically everything is intertwined where you define it to be intertwined. So continuing forward, I've created my main test class. this is the main class I will run. Same syntax, public class, and the name of my class, main test, has to be different. Note that both classes need to be saved in the same folder. So, and to save, you click on save, it'll pop up with a dialog such as this, and you choose where you want to save. And note that both classes need to be saved in the same folder for this to work. So, I've written a code. The syntax for the main class is as follows. So, we have a class, and within it, note I don't have a constructor because I don't want to call this class in another class. I've had my class that I want to call now in this class, and this class is my main class, is where I want to run the class that I created previously. So I now am going to create a main method in which I'm going to run everything. So this public static void main, open brackets, string with the S, capital S, close square bracket, open close square bracket, args, close normal bracket, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. Within that is confining my main instructions, and I'm adding my main instructions there. So really simple. What does this mean? To call my object that I previously wrote, I'd call it by its name, just as I would call a person by its name. I'd call John by John, or Joseph by Joseph, and I'm calling test by test, and I can now name it as I want. Like, you'd see John, or you could see Jonathan, and you'd make a nickname for him, like John, for that temporary time that you have a conversation with him. During this temporary time when I'm calling this object, I want to make a temporary name for him. So I'm calling him object, because he is an object. And you could name this anything, object test, whatever you want. And this is the syntax of how you declare. So you say the name of him, his actual name, his nickname equals the new actual name, open brackets, close brackets, semicolon. That is the statement to initialize. They say I've now called that class. I've imported him into my file. And now I want to run that method. So I'll say the object John, now do this, run message, and do that instructions that I want from you. So now Jonathan would go back and look at message and all his instructions in message, and now run that. And if I run, and if I compile this, I should get no errors. And if I run this, look at what it says, my first Java application. That is what we wrote in here. If I had to change this in here, I could say hello world, and go to our, I'd compile, can't run that, nothing would happen because it's no main class. And I'd compile, and I'd run. Look at that. I've now told the computer to do some sort of instruction. And that's it for the tutorial today. That's showing you simple object-oriented programming and how it works in actual environments like Java and JGraphs. Thanks for watching, and I hope you see my next video where I'll show you how to create a sum classes when creating a simple sum equation. Thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe.